Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of Building Life Science Adventures. I hope most people had a good day yesterday. I think we saw some really insightful panels and Q&A going on, so I would encourage people to be interactive today as well. Whilst the panel's running, if all other attendees could just keep themselves with the camera off and on mute, that would be much appreciated from the housekeeping perspective and clarity. The session will be recorded, so you'll be able to go back and recap what may be points you missed or wanted reminding about. And during the session, if you're able to type questions or comments into the chat box, then the panel will be able to see those and incorporate them into the discussion and come back to you as we go along. So I'm Tony Jones, I'm Chief Exec of Nucleus. I'm delighted to welcome you to this conference. I think they are very important topics because without really good people in our sector, we're not going to achieve what it can achieve. And I think we've seen over the past 12 months what the sector can achieve for society and globally, not just for individuals and businesses in themselves. So, but I think, as we've all been aware, it's not just people in white coats and clinicians that are involved in life sciences. Those businesses need all sorts of skills. So I'm delighted with the panel this morning that's going to talk about life sciences not just being for scientists. And without more ado from me, I'm going to hand over to Mandy Crouch from ARU, who's going to moderate the session for you. I'll see you later.
Thanks, Tony. Hi, so my name's Mandy Crouch and I work at Anglia Ruskin University and I'm the head of employability and careers there. So we have campuses in Cambridge, Chelmsford and Peterborough. And probably for clarity, I just want to be clear that I most definitely do not have a science background. My career has taken me in very many different ways. But I think through my work at the university, we often grapple with how to help students and recent graduates to recognise and navigate the range of career possibilities in front of them. The age-old, when I grow up, I want to be, is only a very small part, really, of the story that we all face throughout our careers when deciding on our next steps. The job title or a career idea is a great starting point, but it is rare people go on to do exactly what they expected. Even our nurses, our teachers and our scientists don't necessarily fully appreciate where their career can take them until they're in it and immersed in it. So the aim of this session really is to stimulate discussion about raising the profile of life sciences amongst non-scientists to attract early career professionals as well as our career changers to the sector. You know, HR, marketing, communications, finance, tech, project management are just some of the non-science based roles that make up any organisation. So, and clearly right now, life sciences is high profile. So there's an opportunity to capitalise on that, to highlight the exciting opportunities available to those who may know little about the sector. So my fellow panellists today are here to share their experiences and viewpoints as well. And perhaps now's a good opportunity to ask them to introduce themselves. So Alexandra, do you want to kick off?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mandy. So my name is Alexandra Black and my background is in business communications. I initially did a business communication degree with a major in journalism. And from there, I worked in various editorial fields, in corporate communications, in consumer publishing, social media management, lots of different areas. And I suppose at various stages, science has been a recurring theme. So I had contributed to several books about the history of science in particular. And because my training was in journalism, I know how to research a subject and to extrapolate the main points from potentially complex subject matter and sort of make it understandable. And I really enjoyed that process. And so I got to a certain stage in my career where I started thinking that life sciences was an area that I really wanted to concentrate on. So recently I completed a foundation science degree and I'm now midway through a master's in biobusiness at Birkbeck College at part of UCL. And as part of an internship that arose out of my studies, I'm now taking on a full-time role as a marketing and communications manager for MedCity, which is a networking organization for life sciences based in London.
Brilliant, thank you, and congratulations on that, Rob. Mosh, do you want to go next?
Yes, thank you, Mandy. I'm going to find it difficult to follow Alexandra after that because I don't have very many disciplines under my belt. So hi, I'm Mosh. I head up the career service at Birkbeck. Funnily enough, today is my last day. So I am the head of the service for the last day, and it's being taken over by somebody else moving forward who is a wonderful, wonderful head of service. But I think what brings me here today is a bit what Mandy said around having a non-traditional background. So I've moved into higher education over the last 5 years, previously to which I've never worked in higher education before. My background was entirely in recruitment and talent management. But I think what I do know, a bit like Mandy said, is nobody has a fixed path of career, and that's certainly true for me, and it's certainly true for the type of students that we have at Birkbeck, who are broadly career changers who are rethinking where they are and what they want to do next. So my job and the job of my team is to try and help them identify ways in which they can take forward their own ambitions that's connected mostly to what their values ecosystem is. So it's around what they're looking for next based on experiences that they've had in the past, which is the bit that we try to do. Outside of that, my interest is kind of how we can make technology and education work together. So obviously over the last 12 months, we've had a really interesting period of time, but my kind of interest area is how we make something like digital first learning a good part of potentially what might happen in aspects of the new academic year. So great to be here. Hopefully I can add some wisdom, but probably not very much. We'll see how the conversation goes.
I'm sure that's not true. Thank you very much. Anne, you want to go next?
Thanks, Mandy. Yes. Hello, everybody. My name's Anne Dugdale. I'm currently working as a freelance consultant in the pharmaceutical and biotech space, but I was originally a life sciences. I was not a life sciences graduate. I was a modern languages graduate. I did French and German at university, and I spent the first 10 years of my career in FMCG marketing and in as an account director in an advertising agency. So very definitely not in the life sciences area, although I did have a few clients when I was working at the advertising agency who were associated with the life sciences in one way or another, and a couple of NHS clients as well. So I'd started to sort of get a sense of what those people did. And I was looking for a change because I was driving 2 hours each way to work 5 days a week, so around the M25 to Chelmsford, and I was living in Hertfordshire. I have to say, this is not in the days when the M25 is like it is today. It was relatively free flowing in those days, but nonetheless, it was a hell of a journey every day. And I just felt like I didn't have a life. I had no time for anything during the week. And then it got to the weekend and I hadn't arranged to see anybody or do anything. And so I sat on my own at the weekends as well. And I thought, this just is not the way I want my life to be. And my primary driver, as it happens, was that I wanted a job close to home. It had to be less than 30 minutes drive away. But where I was living was near Stevenage, and there were a lot of life science companies in that area. And somebody said to me, why don't you look at the life science sector? It seems a pretty good place to be. So I started looking around, and I managed to get a job in marketing in a very small pharmaceutical company. I had to take a pay cut to do it, but I figured with not having a 2-hour drive and everything else that it was worth the investment. And the rest, as they say, is history, because I've now been in the life science industry for over 25 years. I have moved up through sales and marketing roles into business development, spent a number of years in business development, and then ultimately ended up in alliance management. And that's what I've been doing for the last 12 years. So my freelance work now is in business development and alliance management. And I have to say, it's been an absolutely great industry to be involved in.
Thank you. I nearly forgot to unmute then, first time. Mary,
Thank
last
you.
but not least, obviously.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for Tony and Nucleus for inviting us here. So I am the founder and CEO of Optimum Strategic Communications. We are a consultancy who works solely in the life sciences and healthcare area. And what we do is we help companies and investors to communicate their story of what they're looking for. So very much working with small companies or large companies on communicating what they're doing, why investors should invest in them, why they should buy their stock. So that's sort of our focus, and we work globally, but our team is based across Europe. And we obviously shown over the last year that everybody can work very remotely as well. So that's been a good learning exercise from us all. Well, my background is I came out of university and joined a company, moved into what I thought was marketing. It was actually marketing communications. And I thought it sounded very, very glamorous and very exciting, which is the reason I went into it, but not really knowing what it was. And I worked for a company which was backing tech and life science companies, academic entrepreneurs and scientists in universities, helping them to protect their technologies with IP, and also providing finance for them to demonstrate that it could work, and then finding industry partners to take it through to market. And I found I absolutely loved it. A little bit like Alexandra, loved taking very complex, difficult to understand information and turning it into something that was simple and compelling and easy to understand. Then my company went forward to list on the London Stock Exchange. So we did an IPO and I became head of investor relations. Again, not really knowing what that was, but thrown in at the deep end, and also found that I loved it. It was a new audience, several new audiences that we needed to communicate to, the investment community. So fund managers, analysts, we call the buy-siders who invest in your companies, and also analysts, sell-side analysts who are writing about the sector, and also the business media who are writing about your story and who you can read in the newspapers on, talking about whether they should buy or sell your stock. So a completely new audience for me, which I absolutely love doing. And then I left my company at that time and moved to what we call the agency side. So being a consultant and advising lots of companies on how they should be communicating with the investment community and the business media. And been doing that for the last 15, 20 years. And time, as they say, flies very quickly when you're doing something that you absolutely love. And a lot of our companies who we're working with today have been, developing the vaccines and new drugs and tests, which and is, phenomenal what's been happening over the last year. And, very, very proud to be working in the sector that's making such a contribution to help us get out of the pandemic.
Thanks, Mary. Right, okay, so to help kick off discussions, we thought that we came up with a few questions just to avoid the sort of tumbleweed moment where we wait for questions. But if you do have a burning question, please, as Tony said, put it into the chat, and I will do my very best to facilitate those and not miss any. So so put them in, and then either I'm happy to read them out, or can invite you to actually post a question live if you wish. So the first question that we were just going to kick off with really was, what do or can non-science hires bring to life sciences? I think, thinking about it from early careers, it's getting them to recognise the value and what they can bring to the organisation. So I don't know who on the panel, feel free, as I say again, to put your comments into the chat if you've got a particular viewpoint on this, but ask for a volunteer from the panel to sort of answer this first, their viewpoint on what non-science hires bring to the life sciences.
Yes, Mandy, I'm going to answer that question from the perspective of someone who's relatively new to life sciences compared to Anne or Mary, for example. But I think of it this way, that life sciences makes its most important contribution when innovations are translated into real life settings. where they have the potential to make the most impact. And I think to make that happen, one has to view the life sciences industry as creating a product, and that product needs to be regulated, it needs to be cost effective, it needs to be propelled by efficient forms of financing, supported by data, managed well from the macro level and micro level, produced in a facility. It has to be communicated to end users, to the media, to government and industry influencers, distributed, marketed internationally with legal agreements in place. All these various kind of different aspects have to be considered, and each of those tasks really needs someone with expertise in that field. So I think that's why life sciences is most definitely not just for scientists, because otherwise it's not possible to fully translate it and make sure that it has the maximum impact on society.
Can I add to that? I completely agree. What the last year's taught us is, and as Tony mentioned at the beginning, there's an enormous spotlight on the industry, and what we've seen is a huge collaboration of scientists, industry, investors, governments, policymakers, all coming together to make sure, to try and get us out of the pandemic. But absolutely what you said, it's the sector is now, and the industry is now seen as very strategic for governments and countries all around the world. So they all want to invest in it, they want to support it, they want to grow it, and we need the best talent, whether you're an accountant, you're a lawyer, you're a communicator. We've seen a huge increase in nurses and doctors. Everybody should be looking at this sector as a vibrant, dynamic, fantastic place and industry that they want to work in. But as Alexandra said, it's not just scientists in a lab, it's everybody else around them who are helping to turn their fantastic innovations into products to treat patients, whether it's a drug, a test, or someone actually looking after you and making sure that healthcare is and that test is delivered to you. So fantastic place.
Yeah, I would definitely echo those words that have already been said. As somebody who came into the industry from a different early career, and without consciously having sort of thought about what the life science industry was about, it had never occurred to me in a million years that there were so many facets to the business. I mean, if you stand back and think about it logically, they are businesses, so of course they are going to need a whole set of skills, capabilities, functions and everything else, but that hadn't really occurred to me when I moved into the industry, and I think it's very easy to overlook that, but absolutely they do need a whole broad range of skills and capabilities, so there are opportunities, I think, for everybody in the life sciences industry. The important thing, I think, is to be motivated and to want to make a difference and to have an open mind. I've kind of got where I've got really by sticking my head above the parapet. One of my bosses once said to me, "For God's sake, Anne, are you going to stick your head above the parapet again?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I'm interested in that." He said, "You haven't got time to do it." I said, "Well, I'll make time to do it because actually I'm really interested in it." And I was always putting myself forward to say, "Can I get involved in that project? I think it sounds really interesting." And it just, the life sciences industry, in my experience, just gave me so many opportunities to learn and develop and make the most incredible career that was nothing like I had ever imagined that I might have been doing. If you had told me when I left university with a degree in French and German that I would be working as head of alliance management, which was my last job, global head of alliance management for a global pharmaceutical company, I would have said you're completely bonkers. But for sure the opportunities are there. It's up to individuals to make their opportunities, I think, but it's an absolutely great sector to find opportunities, and they are a great sector at supporting people, I would say, in realizing those opportunities.
I'd probably agree for fear of sounding like I don't want to add anything to the conversation. What everyone has said, I think is completely true. But I think what Anne just said there about curiosity, like making yourself available to opportunities, I think is really important. I would say in the line of work that I'm in, and this whole conversation about diversity at the moment, in its traditional definition, I think is important. But I think certainly the work that we do at Birkbeck is we try to focus on the diversity of experience as much as we do on the diversity of its traditional kind of concept. And so diversity of experience would ensure, or the idea is that it ensures people, whatever their ambitions, that they take experiences that they've had in the past and they take those to opportunities that they want to take or are interested in moving forward with. I don't think that there is probably a more interesting sector, given what we've been through over the last 12 months, like Mary said. But the requirements from every sector at the moment, they're all having this conversation about the future of work and what are the skills that employers need from an early careers perspective. And I think the transferable skills, whether you apply it to life sciences or you apply it to any other sector, are really, really key. But more than just having those skills, it's about articulating them in a way that actually brings a compelling story together. So maybe you should connect with Anne after this this panel today, because she could probably help you put those compelling stories together. But curiosity, I think, is probably key, and just kind of being open, like Anne said, to experiencing something that you may not be familiar with. But actually, most people that we know who've had successful careers, that I know as individuals, are probably people who just kind of put their hand up as and when an opportunity came up, and they found themselves in interesting places that they weren't expecting to do so. I would say there's lots that non-scientists can bring, but they have to want to bring it.
That's great. Yeah. And I totally agree. I think probably for me, leading on from all of that, is then how do, we get them to recognise the opportunity? So the organisations that are involved in life sciences, so very similar, from a student perspective, it's the big names. They know who they know in the sector. So obviously everybody will be aware of AZ and, Pfizer and all of those kinds of people right now, because they are the ones that are in the media. And we have similar situations in other areas. They want to go and work for Google, they want to work for Microsoft. It's the big names. But obviously we know that life sciences is made up of lots of organisations of all sizes, shapes and sizes. Right from the startups, the ones that are working on something really innovative, new research, those kinds of things. So I suppose my question would be, how do we, with that curiosity, foster that amongst early careers professionals, but also career changers to even, as Anne said, I think her background is very typical to mine as well. It was other priorities that probably informed my career decisions as I went through. There was other drivers to actually, I want a career in this. It was more about, I need this, and therefore what organisation or job can give me that at this moment. So I suppose that would be my question here, is how can we broaden their understanding of it, looking beyond the big names, the big pharma, those kinds of things that they know about, that are already on their radar. That might be a bit of a tricky question, because if anybody's got the answer, I'd love to know it, because that's what we need with our students.
Like an open Zoom with like video and stuff.
Can I
take a screenshot of Mary?
Oh, sorry. Can I start a stab, if that's okay? I think what's happened over the last year is, you're now reading about life science companies, whether they're small or large, the larger ones obviously that we know of, but they're all making a difference. So, there's a whole host of companies that's jumped in, and, scientists that you've never heard of, and who are now well-known public figures who we talk about just day to day. You know, we talk about who's been talking in the government, who's supporting, you know, Chris Whitty and John Van Dam. All those people are sort of day figures that we talk about. But also it's a deeper understanding of the sector as well. So you know, everybody knows what an antibody is now. You know, everybody reads about messenger RNA. You know, I was saying earlier to the panel, you know, it's now in one of my magazines, my Elle magazine. So, you know, the actual communications around it, I think, is really helping to demonstrate how exciting the sector is and the difference it can make. So I think that general awareness is helping, and hopefully we can continue with that.
Yeah, I think the whole message around the life sciences pharmaceutical industry, the shift has been very, very, very interesting over this whole pandemic, because, you know, it's not that long ago that the stories that you would read about the pharmaceutical industry were around how much profit they were making, profiteering at the, you know, to the benefit, you know, against with people's health and all of that kind of thing. You know, quite negative press really was the predominant public story that was coming out, and that's completely shifted around. And I think, you know, that's created a much more positive platform for anybody, any company in that sector. But I think, you know, Mandy, your question is challenging. How do we encourage and help people to find all of those other companies? I mean, there are sources out there, not least, you know, searching on Google, you know, and you can, I mean, one Nucleus, for example, has a vast membership, and, you know, you can find a whole list of companies, everything from an AZ size down to the smallest startups that are, you know, based in some of the Cambridge Science Park areas. So there are ways to find out about these companies, but how you do that in a systematic kind of way, I think that's a challenging question. Thanks for that, Mandy. I don't have an answer.
I was going to suggest, just on a very practical level, I suppose, because I've been in this position, you know, very recently myself, you know, there are some kind of basic things you can do. I would suggest, for example, even just looking on LinkedIn at jobs generally in the life sciences sector, you know, can give you a sort of rough flavor of what sorts of roles are available in what sorts of companies. Signing up to Science newsletter, there are a couple that I subscribe to. One's a Science Daily, another one's Fierce, and you know, you can just get a little sort of snapshot of what's going on in the industry generally, and that can give you hints as well as to what's going on. And as Anne said, joining a networking organization like One Nucleus, and there are similar sorts of organizations around. I think that's a great idea. Looking for webinars online, just generally in the life sciences sector, and you know, when it's not COVID, maybe looking at attending you know, life sciences trade fairs and so on, which are I haven't been to one myself in the non-virtual setting, but I understand they're, you know, a fantastic way of networking and just finding out, you know, what's going on in the industry and what sorts of opportunities there are for people from, you know, all sorts of careers point of views. And then I guess, as I did, taking it one step further, doing a further course of study like the MSc Biobusiness that I'm doing, which is it's not necessarily oriented at people who come from a pure science background. I came from business communications, and I got onto the course, and I'm able to manage it. You know, there's a lot of reading that I have to do on the science side compared to some of the my fellow students who are from a science background, and they're looking for the business perspective. But you know, if you want to really get immersed, I would suggest, you know, kind of doing a further course of study is a great way as well to find out you know, the scope of the life sciences sector.
Yeah, I think everything that's been said. I need to stop going last because I'm going to say the same thing as everybody else. But I think it's an age-old question, isn't it, Mandy? I mean, this is something that most universities struggle with is how do we make the best possible opportunities available to our students and graduates. But I think part of that has to come from the responsibility of the employers as well as the responsibility of the student. So whatever the size of organisation, whether it is a GSK or whether it's a small startup, I think they have to appreciate that there's work to be done on their side to introduce and attract talent from an early careers perspective. And some of them have bigger budgets and bigger kind of reach than most, and particularly if you're talking about larger companies. But I also think from the student perspective, or from the early careers perspective, if you're looking for that opportunity, then the responsibility is on not just exploring the size of organizations that are there, but as we mentioned earlier, exploring organizations based on the difference that you want to make. So if it's about you wanting to be part of what's happened over the last 12 months, then obviously there are startups and organizations in that space. If you're looking to work on a completely different problem, there are organizations and startups and smaller companies in that space. And so basically, I think it's about identifying the why. When I mentioned the values ecosystem in my introduction, this is why we spend so much time on it. If you know what kind of core values drive your decision making, whether that's life or career anyway, decisions like this or research like this becomes easier. But all good points. Have a look on LinkedIn, join networking groups, things like One Nucleus, and have conversations with people, because you don't know where they're going to lead to. But I think before all of that, you have to know on some level the area in which you're interested in, and then be decisive and strategic about how you get into that space. But I agree, if somebody does know the answer, Mandy, then do let me know, because we struggle with this all of the time. But I think the responsibility is on both sides, and that's important to say.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think you're right. It's actually one of the questions that Tony and I discussed originally when we were looking at this session, is what can employers do more to raise the profile of the opportunities that they offer to non-scientists in the sector. But equally, and I think it goes back to the very first point that you made around, students and any career changer needs to have that curiosity and that understanding of their own values and what it is that they are looking for out of a career, not just a job title. What kind of organization am I comfortable working with? And again, that perhaps goes back a bit to the point that Anne said, perhaps the reputation of the industry in terms of big pharma and those kind of things hasn't helped in the past. There will be some that are very anti it, but are perhaps changing their viewpoint now because of what's gone on over the past 12 months. Feels much longer than 12 months in one way, doesn't it? But yes, over the past 12 months. I think Steve's put a question in. Steve, did you want to come on mic and say it, or do you want me to read it out? Okay, I'll read it out. No, that's fine. So do any of the panelists think there is a residual effect from the retrenchment of pharma and biotech industry over the previous couple of decades, which means that the sector in the UK appears not to be as robust as it used to be, thus putting off potential applicants who think there isn't much of a career to be had? Or that there are few jobs available and it is a risky prospect to explore? Or are things now looking up, and should we therefore be more optimistic and promote the sector more ardently? Mary, did you want to come in?
Yes. So I think there probably was a time where it was hard to get investment in the sector, particularly for some of the smaller companies. It was a real struggle for them to attract investment. What's certainly changed, and this has been changing over the last few years, and I think it's been more in the spotlight over the last year. There's a lot of money around in the sector to invest in innovations, in startups, people at very early stage who are developing promising new drugs or tests or treatments. So that's been a real fundamental shift in the last couple of years, which has been accelerated over the last 12 months. So I think it's a recognition of the importance of life sciences, how strategic it is, which is, got investment, not just from the investment community, but also from government. And I think this is possibly the best time ever to be out there raising money, developing your drugs. It's a hugely exciting time. And, we probably worked with more smaller companies, helping them to launch over the last year than we have ever. So I think definitely a very, very exciting time.
Yeah, I agree, Mary. I think, and I've found this very much in the last 12 months when I've been working as a freelance consultant. Some of the work I have been doing has really highlighted for me the incredible amount of activity that there is, quite often at sort of grassroots and small company startup sort of levels, but a massive amount of energy and activity going on in the industry. To the question that was posed, yes, there is no doubt that there's been a lot of change in the industry over the last 20 odd years. Mergers, acquisitions, resizing, restructuring, and it has led to job losses in some cases. But I think what always hits the headlines is things like the job losses, the negative sides of things, and what rarely gets into the headlines is the new opportunities that those restructures and repositioning of organizations creates. So yeah, it's horrible when you're on the receiving end of restructuring and redundancy. I mean, it's just happened to me a year ago, but there are always new opportunities around the corner for sure. And that's what I think, it's important to keep an open mind to. So I do agree with you, Mary. I think this is a very exciting time to be coming into the industry. For sure, the sort of mergers and acquisitions, restructures, etc., are not going to go away, but they're there in all industries. The pharmaceutical industry, the life science industry is not unique in that. So I don't think it makes it any more risky than any other environment. So yeah, I mean, I would certainly encourage people to have a good look at the life science industry as a potential career move.
Also, just to add to that, on the sort of restructuring M&A front, absolutely. What we've seen is people coming out of pharma but going into biotechs, and we've had an explosion of brilliant biotech companies being started up and growing over the last few years. And the UK is in a fantastic position there, and it will inevitably lead to some of those companies being bought. But what we've certainly seen is that people don't lose their jobs. They are bought and they stay, and they are still doing their jobs, but working possibly for a much bigger company. But effectively what the companies are trying to do is keep that innovation, that nimbleness, and that dynamic team together, because they know that's a great way to develop and progress what they're doing. Sorry, just to add to that.
Well, I was just going to add that it surprised me that there was so much more to life sciences than just pharma and biotech look in the health, aiming towards healthcare product, that there's a lot of development and business activity in ag tech, for example, in the environmental sector, in the industrial sector. So I think that there's expansion in areas such as that are perhaps taking up the slack. If there has been some from pharma and biotech healthcare restructuring. And also even within that sector, the rise of the CRO, for example, has been quite significant. So I think there are sort of changes on both sides to sort of balance out what's been happening overall.
Yep, I I have to say that the relationship between science and technology is probably one that is really closely associated. And I think the number of developments that have happened in the tech space that I am familiar with over the last 5 years or so has now started to trickle through to science. So when Mary says this is a really ripe and opportune time to be moving into this sector, it's definitely true because of the relationship between the two things. But to take Anne's point, it's not always that you find the opportunity that you're looking for, but you find an opportunity in the area that you're looking for, I think is the bit that most people need to remember. Because it is now going to be in the spotlight and has been in the spotlight for quite some time. But with the comments that Alexandra just made, it's not just about pharma. There are so many different types of organizations in this space that I think it's worth remembering. It doesn't just have to be a pharma company, and it doesn't just have to be a startup who's going to get bought out for X in 2 years' time. I think there are some really interesting organizations across the board in all sorts of variations and sectors in between. So I think, as with any sector, opportunities may feel like they're fewer and far between, but how you go about searching for those opportunities is just as important as finding the opportunity in the first place. So if you start having, as we were saying in the previous question, conversations with people, attending networking events, researching types of organizations that you might be interested in, then you'll find that those kinds of opportunities, that even if they don't exist, will start to become more apparent to you. And if you're having the right types of conversations, and I appreciate this is not easy, if you're having the right type of conversation, an opportunity may present itself to you based on the conversation that you're having, as opposed to it existing before. So if you're having good chats with people who are interested in your profile, they may create opportunities for you within the organizations that you're looking for. Rare, but still possible. So I think there's always going to be a chance to move into the sector. You just have to know, with all of the things that we've mentioned before, how to go about it.
Thank you. And I think that's really crucial as well, isn't it? It's using all of those networks to identify those organisations, because as Anne quite rightly said, if you rely on the media and the usual, noise, if you like, around it, then you're only ever going to hear the not so great stories, because unfortunately that's what makes news. And I think joining things like you say, in terms of One Nucleus and the kinds of organised networking opportunities, you hear the good stories too, but you have to delve a little bit deeper. It takes a bit more work, doesn't it? And therefore you've got to be committed to that, and that's where you then identify the kinds of organizations that are doing stuff that you're interested in, but also that meet with your match with your values and the kinds of things. So I think, again, it's that you've got to take personal responsibility for putting the legwork in to get out what you need. Tony's asked a really good question, actually, and I'm definitely not necessarily in a place to answer this one, so I'm hoping some of the other panel feel that they can. So in terms of, he's talking about skill set, so outside of the core science disciplines, what do you feel are the skills that are in shortest supply in the industry, that would then represent the best possible opportunities for new entrants? Does anybody have a sort of feel for that in their own?
I would say, because we're seeing such an explosion in the industry of new companies springing up all over, it's probably across the board. It's communicators, it's people who can do the finance, people who can do the deals. It's probably lots of different roles that are needed. So I would think, just generally, because there are just more and more companies being set up, there'll be a lot of opportunities across the board. But communications is always a good one.
Yeah, I think that's right, Mary. But I think also, and I think we've touched on this a little bit, but just to kind of highlight that it's not just about the skill sets, it's about the mindset of the people that are coming, looking for opportunities, because all businesses want people who are passionate, who are proactive, who want to get things done, who know how to deliver on things. You know, there's a whole raft of soft skills, if you will, that make up the mindset of an individual, that are probably the things that ultimately tip the balance, because there will be, you know, any number of people with a law degree, people with a, you know, whatever accountancy qualification or whatever, but what is it that the companies want at the end of the day? They want people who are going to make a difference, who are going to be passionate, who are going to help drive their business forward. And I think that's the really important thing to come forward with.
Yeah. Spot on.
I'd go as far as to say there's probably 4 key areas that I've kind of seen develop over the last few years on conversations with employers that I think are important. Based on conversations across the sector, and this is not specific to life sciences, I'd say active listening is a skill that tends to get forgotten and disappears. Critical thinking, which you would think are things that are developed over your time during your courses at university, but a skill that employers say is missing. Problem sensitivity is one that came up quite a lot. But I think the key one for me is visioning. Visioning is the idea that you connect different strategic priorities across a role that you might be doing for any type of organization in any sector, but able to connect what they're trying to do, what you're doing, and the problems that you're facing in between, and how those things relate. So those are the kind of 4 key things that I would say on top of what Anne just said around soft skills. So communication, think kind of the usual suspects that you probably hear in a careers workshop around problem solving and team working and collaboration. But those 4 are based on conversations that I've had with employers directly.
That I agree with Marsh, especially on that final point about visioning, which I haven't heard that term before. It's a really good one. But having that kind of strategic mindset where you're not just thinking about your own task, but you're looking to connect with the goals of the team and the organization that you're working for, and looking how you can kind of go out of your comfort zone to help make that happen, I think is really important.
I really like that. I really like visioning. I mean, we often, with students and recent graduates, we talk about that they need to have, and employers ask for this, around commercial awareness. So, but I think, you know, visioning probably is a better take on that, really, because I think sometimes certainly with some of our students that are not perhaps in the business type of courses, they think commercial awareness doesn't apply to them. You know, I'm a creative or I'm a health student. I don't need to know about commercial awareness. Well, actually, yes, you do, because as we said right at the very beginning, every organisation their setup is the same. They're there to, you know, to either make money, or they have a purpose that they've got to fit within budgets. They've got to, you know, they have all of the same priorities, and you need to understand what those priorities are, or you should, when you're looking to, you know, to apply for a role. It is actually, what do I bring to this organisation to help them to meet their objectives and their priorities. So I really like that. Thanks, Mosh. That's one of my takeaways is visioning. I've written that one down.
Can I just add? Sorry, Mandy, can I just add? I mean, I think we're talking a lot about the perspective of the student, and it sounds like we're making it as though they've got a huge amount of work to do in finding their next opportunity, which they do. But similarly, employers have just a bigger role to play. Businesses have just a bigger role to play in identifying people coming into their business. So they also need to stop just looking for the kind of traditional competencies that they might be looking for bringing people in, and start recognizing things like visioning and problem solving and sensitivities. And importantly, if somebody doesn't have all of those skills, but has maybe 7 of 10, for example, then I think companies need to be a bit more flexible in how and what they bring into their organization. Because it can't just be entirely down to an early careers or a career changer person to make this happen. The employers have just as much responsibility, not only in terms of how they bring talent into the organization, but as we were saying before, selfishly for me, it's important that they engage with education at all levels, and we're talking from primary school all the way through to higher and further education.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think, that's often, certainly the work that we do in the university is trying to build those relationships with employers in terms of, so that it is a two-way street. And it is one of the conversations that we very much have with students around when they're applying for a job. It should be a two-way street. It doesn't always feel like that. But even, when you're at interview, it should feel like, you are making a decision about that organisation, and therefore the organisation needs to think about, and we've done it ourselves, how we interview and how the kinds of questions we ask, because actually they should be judging us as well, and we therefore we should hold ourselves in the same to the same high regard as we expect interviewees to. So I think, but again, that's a mindset thing, isn't it? That's, people understanding, actually, this isn't just about me proving that I'm right for you. You need to prove to me that you're right for me. And it's, often that's not the way it is set up. I think the other thing, certainly in terms of the challenges that we've had, or the conversation we've been having with local organisations, is particularly at the moment, everything's so hugely busy. So, the organisations, particularly in life sciences, are inundated with very real-time issues. So actually what they're saying is, we don't have time. We know that we do need these. We need to carry on with our talent pipeline. We do recognise that we need to be attracting talent, but we don't have time. So I suppose that's, and that's the work probably where universities and organisations like One Nucleus can help. But it's how we tie that together, because yes, I think in a lot of instances, employers do recognise that they have that responsibility to make themselves accessible, and to divert, to think about different ways that they attract talent. Introducing strength-based interviewing, so that they're not necessarily just going down skills. Tell me about a time when you've worked in a team. It's more those strength things, because they're realizing then that they get more about the person and whether they then are a good fit for their organization. But a lot of them are saying that they know they need to do it, but time isn't on their side right now. It's, some of them are growing, really quickly, and therefore it's how they don't have time necessarily to access the talent or change their processes. I don't know if anybody's got any viewpoints on that.
I think it's an interesting point, though, and an important point about it's a two-way street, and the companies need to show to the candidates that that they're the right company for the candidate, as well as the candidate being right for the company. And that's tough. That can be a really difficult thing, I think, to assess in what is often quite a short period of time when you go for an interview. You maybe get 2 rounds of interviews. You might see 3 or 4 or 5 people at the second stage interview, but it's still not an awful lot of time to really understand what the company's about or whatever. But it is interesting, because there's been a huge amount in the press through the whole pandemic about companies needing to make themselves more attractive to employees rather, and that employees are going to be looking for different things after the pandemic, and people's life perspectives have changed, and what are companies going to do to respond to that and to accommodate things, and that the companies that do that best and are most able to be flexible and accommodating and what have you are likely to be the companies that will attract and retain the best talent. I think we still need to see how that plays out, because it's way too early yet. We're not even back in offices yet, really, in the large part. But I do think it's a development of that general theme, and is really important.
Yeah, Mandy, I'd also say, I'm sorry, this is obviously a topic that's very, very close to the heart. I'd also say this is probably where students can start rethinking about the type of organisation that they want to go to. So if they find that they're not getting the same level of engagement from larger organisations because it's an issue of time, which I don't buy personally, by the way, but I recognise that they say it a lot, that they can then start identifying the smaller organizations, like Mary's saying, the ones that are more nimble, the ones that are more dynamic, the ones that probably in 2 to 4 years' time will become part of a larger organization anyway. And that level of experience that you could get in the first 2 to 4 years is going to be priceless, I would say, because you can then take that to absolutely any place that you want to if you find yourself in that situation. So I think it's a really good opportunity to not look for the usual suspects when it comes to your career choices and employer choices, and think perhaps differently about who you want to go to next.
No, I totally agree. And actually, in a lot of other conversations that we have, it is more with the SMEs that are saying that they are growing, they are expanding, they've got funding. So go back to Mary's point, they've got funding for a project or research or those kind of things, but they don't have the big HR recruitment, talent acquisition teams behind them to go out and find that talent. So I think that's the point, is they're caught in that piece of, we've got very immediate needs, and with the best will in the world, universities are set in a timetable. They can't be as responsive necessarily as we would love to be, which is why a lot of our work, and Moshe probably the same, is we also keep very much in touch with our graduates, because that's the way that we can then get those opportunities out as well, in terms of talking to alumni about next step, the next job, not the first job necessarily. But I think, I'm with you in the fact that I am always a bit reticent when I hear it from the bigger companies, because they've got big teams that can deal with it. But it is trying to support those SMEs, the smaller organizations that have those real needs. And as you said, actually, and we know the opportunities that could present to our graduates, to career changes. Yes, there is some uncertainty there of not of working for a smaller organization, but normally the range of opportunities they have to get involved in multiple projects is so much bigger than perhaps working for a larger organization. So yeah, I agree, but it's just trying to be as responsive as we can for those smaller companies, and getting that message out there to the graduates that those opportunities are there and the real value of them.
Yeah, and also to take Anne's point about the recruitment process, I think it's way too rigid. And I know I live in some kind of utopian world where recruitment works in a much better way. But I think this idea of constantly looking for fixed competencies over 2 or 3 stages is just not how it works anymore. I think employers, businesses, startups of any size and any nature need to really seriously rethink what recruitment could look like for them, and have far more interesting conversations with applicants. There was a piece of research actually that Birkbeck did, we're talking about 4 or 5 years ago now, in the relationship between how somebody performs at assessment centre stage and how they perform within the workplace 3 months after assessment centre. And you'll be unsurprised to hear that the relationship between how they perform at assessment centre and how they perform in work is 0%. So why have an entirely arbitrary process to tell you what you probably already know about an individual, because you have instinct and intuition about how they might perform at work? So I think instinct and intuition needs to be much more part of the process and part of the conversation when it comes to recruitment. I recognize that companies will not buy into that anytime soon, because it is a very different type of recruitment. But I think where students can make a difference for themselves, or graduates' career changes, is if you're having informational conversations, try and feed in your experiences to the people that you're talking to, whether that's in a networking environment, whether it's in a seminar like this, whether it's that you've identified somebody on LinkedIn that you want to have a conversation with. Have a very different type of conversation about your experience. And I just noticed Tony's coming, so I'm going to stay quiet.
Can I just jump in very quickly, just to add to that? And I think what we're saying, I completely agree. It's, those other skills rather than, I've been trained as a X, Y, Z. But the culture of the company is so important too. And you've got to hopefully you're reading about successful companies in the media or through social media, which is exploded as well in the sector. But look at the culture of the company that you're talking to. Not only how they interact with you, but also do you feel that's definitely the place I want to know? Everybody's passionate, they love what they're doing, and the day goes really quickly, and that's certainly something that we look at and we feel as a team that Optimum is so important. You spend so much time working. You've got to love it.
I think that's probably a good note to perhaps finish the panel discussion on. I'd just like to thank the panel and Mandy for orchestrating that. I think it was a fascinating discussion which throws down a sense of opportunity and dynamism, but also the current challenges. And I think it is a two-way street. All of these things are. I think what struck me actually towards the end was the recruitment process. And I think lots of the small companies that entrepreneurs are setting up do recruit on instinct and relationship and gut instinct. And I think there's something perhaps to be learned from that whole dynamic. But equally, maybe, the thing they haven't got is time in those smaller companies and the support. So maybe there's a role for government to say, well, actually, how do we support SMEs in their recruitment process and their nurturing of talent, rather than just focusing on getting people through the door? It's actually, how do we focus much broader? But I think there's lots of advice and thought-provoking points that came out for me. But as with everything, as I say, it's a two-way street, and it's a relationship between talent and the ecosystem and the companies that make that up. So certainly from a One Nucleus perspective, the idea that we can play a role in raising that awareness and sharing that knowledge is something we were created to do in part. So we enjoy playing that role, and this event is part of that. So thank you for your time and dedication to doing this. For everyone else, the next session is at 10:30 and it's Race for the Top. So you're in through the door. How are you going to get to the top? And what skills do you need? Don't forget, in between times, whilst making the coffee, you can also use the app where there's on-demand content of people sharing their insights on their own careers and some other pre-recorded sessions around the learning and development scenario. But for now, thank you very much, and we'll see you all later.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.